J.D. Vance's intellectual mentor published a plan to seal people deemed undesirable inside permanent fake realities. Whitney Webb spent years connecting the dots between that philosophy. 2026 will be like no other year.
Our goal, in short, is a humane alternative to genocide. That is, the ideal solution achieves the same result as mass murder, i.e., in parentheses, the removal of undesirable elements from society, in parentheses, but without any of the moral stigma.
A philosopher whose ideas sit inside the White House proposed a solution for undesirable people in society. He calls it virtualization. In his ideas, the person is sealed in a cell containing immersive virtual reality and made to live out their days believing they are free and rich. That philosopher is Curtis Yarvin. Peter Thiel, who co-founded Palantir, now embedded inside every U.S. major intelligence agency, calls him one of the most important thinkers of his generation. Thiel funded J.D. Vance. With that, Whitney Webb dives deeper into how that philosophy became a system and how that system is being switched on right now. To understand what is being built, you have to start with Peter Thiel, the same man who bankrolled Curtis Yarvin's influence, co-founded Palantir, a company most people cannot accurately describe. Palantir was not built from scratch.
Responding to concerns about guns by being like, we should apply pre-crime to American social media posts and determine who might be a bad actor before they commit any crime. And from the civil liberty perspective, this is terrible. Mm-hmm. And an even greater warning sign is the increasing involvement, which you brought up earlier, Marty, of Palantir in this administration, because Palantir was specifically really created to be a pre-crime entity. It is a successor to this post 9/11 program that was housed in DARPA called Total Information Awareness, and it's been Palantir since then has been piloting predictive policing.
Simply put, Palantir is a government agency disguised as a software company that collects data and profiles people. And the same man whose philosophical mentor wrote about sealing undesirables in virtual cells built the infrastructure to decide who those undesirables are. But as expected, Palantir has denied all that. At one point, the company's CEO, Alex Karp, appeared at the All In Summit and told a room full of investors that Palantir is not spying on individual Americans. But Webb points to a precedent worth remembering.
How is that possible?
Yeah, do you remember when James Clapper lied about how they were spying on Americans under oath and didn't get in trouble for it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think when people like that say they're not spying on Americans, it's kind of hard to trust them given a lot of the precedents,
Let us now rope in another part of this whole network. To do that, we have to go back to the summer of 2019 when a cluster of mass shootings occurred across the U.S. Afterwards, public pressure on the government to act was intense. But what is less remembered is what happened just before those shootings. The then Attorney General William Barr gave a speech arguing the government needed a backdoor access to all encrypted communications. He acknowledged the public would resist, but a galvanizing event would soon change that.
And then not long after that, William Barr makes pre-crime an official policy of the Department of Justice. So he set up the infrastructure to legalize pre-crime at that time in October 2019. And so it's been being built on ever since, but they haven't really necessarily deployed it massively.
At the same time, Jared Kushner and Ivanka Trump were lobbying internally for HARPA, an agency that would use AI to scan American social media in bulk and route flagged users to court-ordered psychiatric intervention. They were proposing court-ordered physicians and potential house arrest, all based on a post. Shockingly, this was not the first time this proposal had made its way into the White House.
So, ultimately, they didn't make HARPA, but Biden made HARPA. It's called ARPA-H. And the same architects of the HARPA that was being pitched under Trump ended up being the same architects of Biden's ARPA-H. But ARPA-H was sold as a cancer moonshot. We're going to cure cancer with ARPA-H.
And then there is Carbine 911. A company that marketed itself to counties across the U.S. as a tool to prevent mass shootings by taking over their 911 infrastructure. It was financed by Jeffrey Epstein and Leslie Wexner. It was chaired by Ehud Barak, the former Israeli prime minister. Members of Israel's Elite Signals Intelligence Division, Unit 8200, also sat on its board. After the Epstein connection became public, something happened.
United States. But after the Epstein stuff came out, they tried to rebrand as more American, so they only left one, ex-Israeli intelligence guy. They put like Michael Chertoff on the board of advisors, who was former DHS, and they put one of Trump's previous heads of DHS, Christian Nielsen, I think her name was, and then an ex-FBI guy or something, to try and, I guess, make it look more American. But it's really the same. The same type of program, and also Peter Thiel was a big investor.
Palantir profiles you. Carbine 911 controls the emergency lines, but Webb has proof that the surveillance extends deeper into your bank account.
Digital ID really won't work unless everybody complies. And, unfortunately, they're going to try to figure out some way to manufacture consent for the compliance, and they're damn good at that, unfortunately.
The same administration whose philosophical foundation includes virtualizing undesirables passed the Genius Act in 2025. This was legislation framed as stablecoin regulation. What followed told the real story. The U.S. Treasury opened a public comment period on implementation. Inside that document, it described digital ID as an essential pillar of the effective implementation of the Genius Act. Digital ID does not appear in the law itself. It does not need to. You do not mandate a cage by writing the word cage. You build it piece by piece and make everything people need available only from inside it. The Patriot Act is being cited as the legislative foundation for the financial surveillance being layered into the stablecoin framework. The same post-9/11 law used to justify mass surveillance of Americans is now being used to regulate how they hold money. And as fate would have it, this template is already running elsewhere. In 2025, approximately 84 million bank accounts in Vietnam, a country just over 100 million people, were closed in a single government action. The justification was financial fraud, and the solution was simple. Submit a face scan or a fingerprint, and you will be re-banked. In the UK, the same digital ID infrastructure is being pushed through under a different rationale.
So Keir Starmer is pushing through digital ID to stop illegal immigration, which, previously the Labour Party in the UK was pushing it. We're going to stop.
The justification rotates, but the destination does not. The mechanism is straightforward. When dollar stablecoins spread globally, people in countries with weak currencies abandon local money for digital dollars. Governments facing capital flight respond by requiring biometric registration to access any bank account at all. Digital ID becomes the price of financial participation. Vietnam has already paid it. The United States is being priced in now. For governments watching their populations quietly dollarize their savings, this is an existential threat. Capital flight destroys local monetary policy. Countries that lose their population's savings to foreign stablecoins lose the ability to borrow cheaply, manage inflation, or fund public spending. And so they act. They restrict access to stablecoins. They require biometric registration to use any bank account at all. They make the digital ID the price of participation in any financial system. Vietnam has done it. Pieces of it are being built in the UK, the EU, and across Southeast Asia. And the United States is next. It is also important to remember that inside a 300-page Trump administration policy report on page 167, a recommendation is proposed to expand the Patriot Act to cover digital assets. Shortly after, Treasury and FinCEN proposed eliminating CoinJoin, banning delayed transaction broadcasting, and flagging single-use Bitcoin addresses as suspicious. Single-use addresses have been the recommended security standard for over a decade. So what does calling them suspicious point toward? It simply implies this is not about catching criminals. It is about making ordinary financial privacy impossible to defend.
This is about censoring or preventing regular people from having privacy.
The financial cage might require your compliance, but Webb uncovers a damning fact. Compliance is not accidental. Rather, it's engineered. And to understand how it's engineered, you have to understand who is doing the engineering and what they actually believe.
And the so-called libertarian elites behind people like J.D. Vance and that have been really involved with the Trump administration this cycle are very overtly transhumanist and think that the only way forward is to basically merge with machines.
By now, it's clear that Palantir, the Genius Act, and Carbine 911 are not separate policy decisions made by unconnected people. They are the output of a specific worldview held by a specific network that is now operating inside the US government. Curtis Yarvin's vision is a state completely privatized and handed to a corporate monarch. The authoritarian powers of the state are not eliminated. Rather, they are transferred. Peter Thiel funded the politician who became vice president. Thiel also built the data company with contracts across every intelligence agency. The philosopher and infrastructure share the same patron.
It makes sense when you look at how people like Eric Schmidt are also on the steering committee of Bilderberg with Peter Thiel and Alex Karp. And we're told these are elites on different sides. Like you had people in last election like Pete Canones being like, these are our elites. They're on our side. And Barry Weiss being like, yeah, they're the counter elites.
Yeah.
No, they're not.
Webb has a term for this: phase shift dialectics. This is where political figures and elite networks publicly perform opposition to each other while advancing the same underlying agenda. Peter Thiel backed Trump while Alex Karp donated to Democratic causes. Media coverage treats them as ideological opposites, but they sit on the same Bilderberg steering committee alongside Eric Schmidt of Google. Palantir holds contracts with every U.S. intelligence agency, regardless of which party controls the White House.
Both sides, and this idea that there's these two types of, two classes of elites that are fundamentally different. No, at the end of the day, they are playing us against ourselves, and some of them play the role of we're elites on this side and we're elites on the other side to help engineer the divide and conquer necessary to herd us into this cattle pen.
And this is also where Operation Gladio comes in.
And this has been going on since the 1980s with Operation Gladio. When they developed the strategy of tension, they were the CIA and intelligence agencies basically were funding terrorism against civilians in Europe, and then they were blamed on left-leaning groups, and they specifically were going after civilians, and it was a CIA.
In Operation Gladio, the actual goal was to make populations afraid enough to accept governments and policies they would otherwise have rejected. The same old playbook: create the crisis, offer the solution, and extract the liberty.
If they want to institute draconian control measures, digital control measures over the United States or Western society or global society at large, they're probably, they tend to fall back on these same patterns and tactics that they've used time and again, decade over decade.
Now, understanding who is building this system and why brings us to the final question: what can actually be done? Webb is not without an answer, but it requires understanding exactly how the cage closes and where the gaps still are.
Right, but it's important to be able to use all the tools at our disposal to fight this war, but we also don't want to fall victim to the stuff that they're trying to entrap us in.
Right.
Every system described in this video has one vulnerability. It requires your participation. Palantir needs your data. The Genius Act needs your financial transactions. Digital ID needs your biometrics. The pre-crime framework needs your social media posts. None of these systems function at full capacity unless enough people cooperate with enough of them. Every time you comply without resistance, you signal to yourself and to the system that this is normal. Normalcy is what the system is trying to manufacture.
But this is how it's going to operate. And eventually it'll be like, if you don't want to comply with digital ID, then you can't be banked, period. Or it could be, infinite number of things. You can't travel, etc. if you don't play ball. And, it was the vaccine passport crap during COVID, but that's really just a roadmap.
The same architecture is being rebuilt now with financial access as the lever. If you had no cushion to absorb the cost of refusal earlier on, have you built one since? And once you build that capacity, the next step is to figure out how to live without this jail that Yarvin talked about.
Well, even with that, the only thing I would add is that I think it's important for people to not become dependent on any sort of AI algorithm, because there's the whole, I mean, I've talked about this for years. If you don't use it, you lose it kind of thing. If we become...
Only by doing that can you really be safe from everything planned by these elites.